There was no role for our deep state. It was. This is something that the Prime Minister has been working on for a long time and has been worked on for hundreds of years, frankly. I've been reading about it. But I will leave Bangladesh to the Prime Minister.
The message was unambiguous. The United States was walking back on its meddling in Bangladesh. It is going to be hands-off from here on. Bangladesh is to be left to India as its geopolitical backyard. While this is one of the many positives that have come out of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's early trip to Washington, D.C., it is important to understand how this is going to pan out in Dhaka going forward. Let us look at the events of this week alone. Bangladeshi generals have met their counterparts from the ISI. The puppet regime of Mohammad Yunus, which now has lost the patronage of the US deep state, has been engineering a political situation in Bangladesh to make it amenable for the return of the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party of Khaleda Zia, to power whenever elections are held. Which is understandable because if the public sentiment played a role in ouster of Sheikh Hasina, then BNP is the only political alternative. All the cases against Khaleda in which she was charged or convicted of corruption, 5 at last count, have been taken back. The former Prime Minister has been ailing for a while and is presently undergoing treatment in London under the care of her son, Tariq Rahman, who is also the acting chief of the party. Interestingly, in signs of political cunning, the Yunus regime has not absolved Rahman of all cases, which means uncertainty remains on whether both Khaleda and Rahman can return to Dhaka. Khaleda on grounds of health and Rahman due to the cases. Parallelly, Dhaka has been making some deft moves to make sure that the return of Sheikh Hasina becomes impossible. Not only the former Prime Minister's return, but even the participation of a party, the Awami League, is being made difficult through a vindictive judicial process to bar political activity by the deposed Prime Minister on grounds of law. Hasina faces over 100 cases from corruption to arson, from inciting political violence to even murder at last count. Even if she returns, she might face a long jail term. Despite that, she clearly wants to. Addressing party workers through a Facebook Live, she showed some political courage this week, calling Yunus a terrorist and making it clear that she would sure return to Bangladesh.
একটা মানুষকে পিঠে মারা কি সোজা কথা? এরা কি অমানুষ? এদের মধ্যে মনুষ্যত্ববোধ নাই? না, আমি সব ছবি দেখছি, তো আমি লাস্ট দেখছি, এটা প্রতিবাদও করছি। আমি তো এনকোয়ারি কমিটিও করে দিয়েছিলাম। আমি জজ সাহেবরে দিয়ে কমিটি করছিলাম যে যাদের মারছে এগুলি তো এনকোয়ারি করা হোক। সে তো কাজ করতে দেয়নি। যে এখন যে ক্ষমতা আছে ইউনূস তো এই এনকোয়ারি করতে দেয়নি, বন্ধ করে দিচ্ছে এবং তাদেরকে মাফ করে দিচ্ছে, দায় মুক্তি দিয়ে দিচ্ছে, এদের বিচার হবে না। কিন্তু আমি দেশে ফিরে এসে আইন করে তাদের বিচার করছি। ইনশাআল্লাহ এই হত্যারও বিচার আমি করব।
As per the constitution of Bangladesh, a caretaker government holds general elections, which the Yunus regime was supposed to do in the constitutional window of 3 months. But it's been over 6 months since the coup, and there are no signs of that happening. We have had some sound bites coming from Yunus himself and some of his advisors that the elections would be held at the right time. But it seems that the present puppet of the former US deep state has started enjoying his days under the spotlight and wants to delay the polls. What should be India's ask now that there is no American meddling? Let's be clear. Whatever happens inside Bangladesh is an internal matter for the Bangladeshis to handle as a sovereign nation. India only has some legitimate national security concerns which should be addressed. Last 6 months have seen some destabilizing consequences, particularly in India's northeast. The spiteful Yunus regime has let loose the radical elements which in the long term are going to singe Bangladesh, make no mistake, like Pakistan, but in the short term constitute a security headache for India to handle. I focused on this aspect more than a couple of times in earlier episodes of Get Me Right. Let us look at the India ask one by one. First, the Yunus regime must announce a time frame for elections and stick to it. It cannot be a generality that whenever time is right, it would be done. The Supreme Court of Bangladesh should be able to impose a deadline if the country fancies its democratic institutions. There's an example from the past when Hasina and Khalida came together to force the military regime of General Ershad to hand power back to an elected civilian government in 1990. It can happen again. 2. The elections should be inclusive with all political players allowed to participate. There is merit in the argument that Sheikh Hasina pushed the envelope beyond limit for public sentiment to turn against her on the ground. She was repressive and authoritarian. She should have allowed Khalida Zia to get best medical treatment abroad and for the principal opposition party, the BNP, to breathe. 2 wrongs do not make a right, but. So while Sheikh Hasina can face judicial process as per the law of the land, her party must be allowed to contest elections. That would be the true test of the public sentiment against Hasina. Yunus should not fear that. 3. Sheikh Hasina should be allowed to return with safety of her life guaranteed. It is not about extraditing her from India, but to send her back to Dhaka and to not throw her at the mercy of a bloodthirsty mob. There was never a life threat to Khalida or to Yunus. The same should be extended to Hasina. 4. In a throwback to the Ziaur Rahman days, Bangladesh foreign policy has swung towards Pakistan. That's bad judgment, to put it politely. As our earlier segment showed, Pakistan is on the brink of another 1971 moment when Balochistan and even Khyber Pakhtunkhwa could break away on the grounds of similar treatment to minorities and others, as it happened in the case of Bengali nationalism, which led to the creation of Bangladesh. It would be foolhardy for Dhaka to pivot to Islamabad in the fond hopes that it can provide any kind of countervailing force against New Delhi. Let's not even get into the issue of morality here. 5th, and finally, the Yunus regime has played enough havoc with India's national security concerns already. This must stop, unless it wants an angry response. There's no trump card left in Washington, D.C., and Yunus can push the envelope only that far and no further. Thanks for watching.